Hello, and welcome to Sharp, the podcast where we help you get a little better at the stuff you have to do, so you can spend more time doing the stuff you want to do. My name's Steve O'Neill, and in each Sharp episode, I'll be sharing a bite-sized slice from anywhere that I can find great ideas, tips, and suggestions which help us do things faster, better, or with a different approach. I'll do the research on social media, podcasts, and the written word to bring you quick, practical, and effective help in working with people, getting more out of yourself, or just getting more from life. We'll have a short, sharp episode weekly, and then once a month, we'll gather up that bag of tips and mix it in with some conversation in a longer episode. However you choose to listen, I'm here to share things that work in the real world in a way to suit you. So now, on with the episode. As this is the first episode, I thought it might be helpful to explain what we're doing here. If you look in the media, it seems that the stories and narrative when it comes to success often revolve around top performers, industry leaders, sports people, recording artists, and those that aspire to that level of success can find plenty of help out there to help them on their way. But it strikes me that in real, everyday life, the vast majority of us count success in other ways. For example, if you're a small business owner, success might be just getting a good night's sleep because the books balance or you know the mortgage is going to be paid. If you're a busy mum or dad, success can be as simple as getting everybody around the table for dinner at night. If you manage a team of people, success might just be that sense that you're getting a little better at what you do as the months pass. If you want to get a little better at anything, you can look online, social media, you can go to any bookshop, and you'll be spoilt for choice with the amount of resource that's out there to help you. But if you're already busy, spending time separating what might be helpful from what's not can become a job in itself. I've spent 30 years managing teams of people, managing sales, and developing and implementing training. And over that time, I've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't. Now, I'm sad enough to spend a lot of my spare time now reviewing these things which claim to make life better. And I find that a lot are good in theory, but are they really useful in practice? If I could show you a way of doing a day's work in 30 minutes less, what would you do with that 30 minutes? Would you spend time with your family? Would you relax? Maybe spend a bit of time on that hobby or interest that you never usually get round to. Now, to achieve that, you can often find a solution in a book or an online resource, usually with the word productivity in the title. But that word isn't really very inspiring to many, and most probably get no further than skimming the title and moving on. But if there was a way of getting an hour more in your week to do something that you really had to, or that you really wanted to, well, that might just be worth looking at. And if you're able to do what you wanted and not be distracted by something else, well, maybe that would feel a bit better. And that's the aim of this podcast. It's called Sharp because it's based on the premise that if you spend a little time sharpening the saw, you can cut down the tree more quickly. So I'm going to take my Sharp filter and apply it to this stuff that's out there and share things that I know work. And there's a couple of things it won't be. It won't be heavy going, it's not going to be a load of theory and process, and I won't be taking myself too seriously. And the podcast won't just be about what's happening in the studio. I'll be bringing ideas and insight from the field. Now, today I'm in a field, so the insight is probably limited to maybe what's happening in the world of farming. I think the birds are probably the only people I'm going to get any conversation with from here, and maybe my best idea is to get back inside that warm studio. Hello? Anybody want to talk to me? For things to be in the show, they need to meet one of two criteria. Either there's something that I've learned to do myself so I can explain firsthand how and why it works, or it's something that has some science or proven credibility about why I'd share it. Even better, I'm hoping that most of the stuff has both. In the first episodes, we're going to cover the basics. Where is this stuff? How do I start? In each episode, there'll be links in the show notes to show you where these things live. And we're going to cover loads of stuff. I don't presume that everyone will find it all right for them. But if you find one or two things that help you, then I'll be pleased I've done a pretty good job. So, as this is a podcast, our first topic is podcasts. It's not lost on me that it might seem a little bit weird talking about the benefits of podcasts on a podcast. But bear with me. If you'd have asked me 5 years ago what a podcast was, I wouldn't have known myself. Even now, regular podcast listeners are still in a minority. In the UK, according to the Radio Joint Audience Research, in 2015, 3.7 million adult listeners tune into podcasts, which is only 6.5% of the adult population. In America, it's a larger percentage, but it's still, depending on the figures you read, only between 15 to 17% of the population. And it's not surprising. The media's only been around since 2004. Adam Curry is credited as being one of the earliest pioneers and the first person to have a regular podcast. His was called the Daily Source Code. In the early days, Apple were unhappy with the word pod being used because it's part of their brand name, but they eventually had to let it go as far as the word podcast is concerned. And in 2013, Apple themselves reported to have 1 billion subscriptions across 250,000 unique podcasts. Describing what a podcast is a bit like describing what's TV or what's books. Podcast is just the media, it's the way of getting it to you. You can think of podcasts in one area like time shift radio. If you've missed your favourite comedy or radio show from the BBC, they're nearly all downloadable as podcasts. If you like fiction or movies or drama, you can download audiobooks, true crime, plays, your favourite shows and so on. Have you heard of a programme called Serial? If you have, it won't be a surprise, as it broke records when it became the most listened to podcast in history, with 68 million downloads. There's all sorts of stuff in podcasts. There's brain stuff, tech stuff, chat. You can learn a language. You can learn how to improve your fly fishing. You can get better at cooking. There's podcasts on knitting, meditation. If you want to learn more about this world and some of the great people in it, there's some great programs from the likes of TED, Radiolab or Freakonomics. There's plenty to inspire you and give you pause. The one you feed is a really nice one for that. There's loads of stuff to laugh at. One of my favourites is Adam Buxton. If you've not got much time, the Merriam Webster word of the day is 2 minutes long, puts a brand new word of the day into your inbox each day. On the other hand, if you want to dig in for something a bit more lengthy, Carlin's Hardcore History. Some of them are 6-hour epics, and they cover everything from the Cuban Missile Crisis to detailed deconstructions of events in history that really make you feel like you've lived it. And it's not just spare time stuff either. Depending on what you do for a living, there's almost guaranteed to be a podcast to support you. If you're a photographer, there's some great stuff from Adobe and Photoshop. If you're in the field of sales, you can listen to Accelerate by Andy Paul. There's stuff in economics, law, retail, veterinary practice management, even producing voiceovers. Whether you're an architect, in property, a writer, a manager, marketing or IT, there's a podcast for you. In the area of self-development, there's some great stuff by Tim Ferriss, Tony Robbins, David Allen and Michael Hyatt. Now, the reason I'm sharing all this is that no matter what you do, there will be a podcast to keep you informed, up to date and sharp. And the great thing is, they're nearly all free. There's a number of ways to get them. You can go directly onto iTunes and download them to your PC or to your iPhone. The best way now is to use a Podcatcher app, which you can download onto your phone. And the great thing about these is many of them will download the episodes you want to listen to automatically, but they also give you some good recommendations and get you to look at things you might not have thought of. Some of the good ones are Stitcher, Podbean, Overcast, TuneIn. I use one called Beyond Pod, that's free. The great thing about podcasts is that you can listen while you're doing other things. For example, I often listen in the car. So I'm sitting here in traffic on the motorway, which is not unusual. I'm on my way to a meeting, but I've got a couple of hours to go. I've called all my team, hands-free, obviously, so I've got no one I need to ring. I can't read email, not legally, and of course, I can't read or send text. So I've got a number of options. I can listen to the radio. I quite like listening to talk radio. I could sing, but don't worry, I won't do that with you. Or I could listen to some podcasts. I've got some downloaded on my phone, and my phone's already connected hands-free via Bluetooth, so I can do that safely. And I'm going to play the next episode of Michael Hyatt to get some inspiration ready for when I get to my destination. Before I do that, 2 quick tips from the road. My first tip is put your episodes in your playlist before you set off. So if you get the opportunity to listen to some on the road, you can do that seamlessly without having to pull over or find an episode, obviously, or risk temptation of going onto your phone whilst you're driving, which clearly you don't want to be doing. The second tip, which I find really useful, if you hear something in the podcast that you want to make a note of, obviously you can't write it down and you don't want to be touching your phone, so call yourself hands-free. You can either phone, if you've got an office landline, you can phone that, or phone your own mobile and then leave a message with a reminder to go back later. So once you're out of the car, you can go back and either research that point that you wanted to make a note of yourself or re-listen to that part of the podcast. So that's my top tip for on the road, and that's enough from the car. So now I'm going to listen to some Michael Hyatt. So, give podcasts a try if you haven't already. They're dead simple, a great way of staying up to date and being informed. They can help you learn and help you to stay sharp. In the show notes, I'll put some links to some options that we've talked about. If you are an already seasoned podcast fan, I hope there's been something of interest to you. And this, of course, is a great opportunity for you to share these ideas with someone that doesn't know very much about podcasts. You can probably tell that I am a great fan of podcasts. In fact, I like them so much, I made one. Social media. There's no getting away from it. Social media has firmly become an embedded part of life. There can't be anybody listening to this that doesn't spend time on at least one of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, YouTube. Now, social media can be great. So it might come as a surprise to you that my very first tip about social media is not to use it more, but to use it less. According to an article by The Telegraph, the average Brit spends 1 hour and 20 minutes a day managing an average of 4 social networks. That's more than 1 full working day a week. When I read that, I didn't believe it at first. So I researched some of these apps where you can measure your social media usage, and there's plenty to choose from. I chose one called Breakaway. This measures the amount that you use, and it also shows you how much time you spend on the different media platforms. Breakaway is available for Android and iOS. There's plenty of others. There's one called Flipped, which is FLIPD. That's for Android. That's pretty drastic because that one locks your phone to stop you from getting into some of the platforms if you need that level of disconnect. And there's another one called Moment, which is for iOS, where you can set limits. Now, I don't count myself as a social media addict, so I couldn't believe that across the different platforms, the odd check-in here and there added up on average to 40 minutes a day. And sometimes at weekends, it went up to 2 hours. Do you remember that 30 minutes a day I said at the start that you could save each day? Arguably, that's literally right in your hands now. So if you're anything like the average in the Telegraph, you've only got to reduce your social media usage by 1/3, and there's your 30 minutes right there. So have a look at one of these apps. You might surprise yourself, and if you then decide that you think it's important enough to focus on, the only problem you've got to work out is how you're going to spend that extra half an hour a day. So that just about wraps it up for episode 1. In the next episodes coming up, assuming that you get your social media to a level that you're happy with, we're going to look at a few useful ways to get more from Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn. I'll be having a look at how to get email under control, and I'll be sharing other inspirational stuff that I've found on my journeys that I think you'll find interesting. Between now and next time, I challenge you to challenge yourself and decide what you want to work on to keep yourself sharp. Getting a bit cold out here now. Think I can come in?